We begin the half hour with the federal government's fight against what many call an attempt to suppress the minority vote in this country. A Texas state law requiring a photo ID to cast a ballot is now on hold until a federal court decides whether it can be enforced. The Justice Department argues the measure deprives Hispanic voters who tend to lack this kind of identification. NBC's Justice correspondent Pete Williams just sat down with Attorney General Eric Holder. So, Pete, what did the Attorney General tell you in this new interview?
Well, he calls this a solution in search of a problem that says in-person voter fraud really isn't that serious, but he says that requiring a photo ID does set up an obstacle to a constitutional fundamental right. Here's the way he put it.
Sure, we want to make sure that our elections are free from fraud, but there is no proof that our elections are marred by in-person voter fraud.
Now, I asked the Attorney General, I said, we have to show driver's licenses to do lots of things in our lives, to get on a plane, as the governor of one southern state said, even to buy Sudafed. But the Attorney General says voting is a fundamental constitutional right, that you shouldn't have to show an additional requirement like a photo ID in order to vote. And the problem, he says, is that many people who don't have them would have to either pay money or go to great lengths or travel great distances in some places in Texas, he said, in order to get one. For example, in Texas, you have to be fingerprinted to get the photo ID as the alternative to the driver's license. So for all these reasons, he says the Texas one was the Justice Department decided would get in the way of voting, and that would be unconstitutional. And as a separate matter, in the other states that don't have to get pre-clearance from the Justice Department, he still thinks it's a matter of bad public policy, though he realizes that this is something that virtually every state legislature now is looking at.
All right, Pete, thank you. And supporters of the law have dismissed the federal government's move as election year politics, while others argue it's merely defending the right to vote. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee joins us live from her district in Houston. Congresswoman, thank you for your time.
Cameron, it's very nice to be with you this afternoon.
So the Department of Justice says 81 of Texas's 254 counties do not have a place where people can go get a driver's license. There's not an operational driver's license. To me, that seems to be the tip of the problem here. If you're going to require people to have this kind of ID, you should have the access available. What are your concerns here?
Well, the Justice Department decision was a thoughtful, well-reviewed decision after seeking to determine whether the voting rights law in Texas or the voter ID law was correct. Frankly, this is a reflection of the law, the Voting Rights Act, which simply says one person, one vote. And as Texas sought to implement or to put in place a voter ID, picture voter ID, they didn't think it through. This was done by the Republican-driven legislature that won after the 2008 election, 2008 election. They won in 2010. And obviously there seems to be underpinnings of trying to dumb down or depress the minority vote. 82 counties, or 82 counties without a DPS office, Department of Public Safety, asking the homebound or those who are seniors who are also impacted in a devastating manner to find other ways to get a voter ID, a picture ID, telling students that if you have a state-issued student ID from a university that is accredited, that you cannot use that. However, you can use a concealed weapons permit. Clearly seems to point to certain populations will be allowed to vote and others will not. This is a very good decision because we only have 12.8 million voters. 2.4 million voters in the state of Texas don't have a picture or a state-issued ID and don't have ways of getting it.
Right.
Some don't have marriage licenses or other forms of identification. This is a right decision by the Department of Justice.
So some of the numbers, Hispanic voters in Texas are at least 50% more likely and possibly more than twice as likely as non-Hispanic voters to not have these driver's licenses. But I want to read something. This is Keith Rothra. He's from Gregg County, Texas. He's a Republican chairman. He said that this is playing the race card. Let me read this quote to you, Congresswoman. He says, all of this, once again, I'm sorry to say, people playing the race card, and it's time for that to end. I'm tired of the Democratic Party playing the race card and calling the Republicans racist when they are the ones playing the race card. Are you and the Democrats in the state of Texas playing the race card?
Well, the Department of Justice represents the entire United States of America, and whether it was Department of Justice under President Bush or President Reagan or President Clinton, they have an obligation to follow the law, and that's what they did. Let me explain that I have every respect for a difference of opinion, but our own Attorney General of the state of Texas indicated that in the last decade they only prosecuted and were able to prosecute 50 cases in the last decade. That's 5 cases per year.
But do you take particular offense at a Republican in your state saying, listen, Democrats are just playing the race card here? Does that particularly bother you?
Well, it bothers me because of the lack of understanding. I don't waste time on people's opinion, but it bothers me because people will be denied the right to vote because of misunderstanding and mischaracterization. I'm enthusiastic about the Department of Justice decision and enthusiastic that they're going to pursue this in court. This gentleman will find out it's not a race question when he sees millions and then thousands upon thousands, if not millions, be denied the right to vote. This is a precious constitutional right. We have a presidential election. I don't care whether voters go out and vote Republican or Democratic or independent. I want them to be able to vote. And there is no evidence that people show up and try to impersonate another voter. This is wrong-headed, misdirected. I hope we will pursue this, and I really hope the Supreme Court will look in a fair manner at the numbers who will be impacted. And let me say this, Tamaron, the state did not send in numbers regarding African Americans, they didn't send in numbers regarding Asians, and they didn't send in numbers regarding seniors or homebound or disabled persons who also may lack opportunities to get a picture voter ID. And so this is not a joke, and this is not race-based, except for the fact that the Voting Rights Act says no barrier should bar a citizen of the United States from voting regardless of race or ethnicity. But it covers a wide range of individuals. It's the right decision to make.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. Obviously, this is not going anywhere anytime soon. Thank you, ma'am.